The coffee aisle at the Safeway in Portland, Oregon is half empty. Not because of a supply chain delay, not because of a trucking shortage, not because of a seasonal fluctuation in demand. The shelves are half empty because the product that used to fill them no longer crosses the border. The brand names are still there: Folgers, Maxwell House, Starbucks ground coffee. But the premium single origin bags, the ones with the small batch roasters labels, the ones that cost $12 to $18 and sat on the top shelf, are gone. And they are not coming back. This is the story of what happens when a trade war stops being abstract and starts showing up in the morning routine of 40 million Americans who never thought it would affect them. On March 23rd, President Donald Trump signed an executive order imposing a 35% tariff on all coffee imports from Colombia. The stated reason was retaliation. Colombia had refused to accept deportation flights carrying undocumented immigrants back to Bogotá. Trump framed the tariff as a matter of sovereignty and enforcement. If they won't take their people back, Trump said at a rally in Tampa, then we won't take their coffee. Simple as that. The crowd cheered. The policy went into effect at midnight. And within 72 hours, the American coffee supply chain began to fracture in ways that will take years to repair. What Trump did not mention, because either he did not know or did not care, was that Colombia supplies 38% of the premium Arabica coffee consumed in the United States. That is not a niche product. That is the foundation of the specialty coffee industry. The beans that independent roasters in Seattle, Austin, Brooklyn, and Denver depend on. The beans that Starbucks uses for its reserve line. The beans that sit in the grinders at 10,000 cafes across the country every morning. And those beans, as of March 23rd, became economically unviable to import. The tariff did not just raise the price. It destroyed the margin. A pound of Colombian coffee that cost a roaster $6 now costs $8.10 after the tariff. But the retail price customers will pay has a ceiling. Nobody is spending $24 for a 12-ounce bag of coffee at their local grocery store, no matter how good it is. So roasters are left with two choices: absorb a loss on every bag they sell, or stop selling Colombian coffee entirely. Most chose the latter. Within 1 week, orders from Colombia dropped 79%. Not 79% below projections. 79% below the previous week's actual volume. Roasters who had spent years building relationships with Colombian farmers, who had invested in direct trade programs and sustainability certifications, who had marketed their coffee on the story of where it came from, canceled their contracts. Not because they wanted to, because the math no longer worked. And the consequences did not stop at the border. Samuel Ortega is a 53-year-old coffee farmer in the highlands of Huila, Colombia. He has been growing coffee for 31 years. His farm spans 18 acres. He employs 11 seasonal workers during harvest and 4 full-time staff year-round. He sends his 2 daughters to university in Bogotá with money earned from selling coffee to American roasters. 3 weeks ago, his largest customer, a roaster in Portland that had been buying his beans for 9 consecutive years, sent an email. The subject line read, "Contract suspension." The body of the email was 4 sentences long. The roaster explained that the tariff made it impossible to continue. They apologized. They said they hoped to resume the relationship if circumstances changed. And they wished him well. Samuel read the email twice, then walked outside and looked at his fields. 31 years of work, 18 acres of coffee plants in full production, and no buyer. "I do not understand American politics," Samuel said in a phone interview conducted through a translator. "I grow coffee. I do not make decisions about deportations or immigration. But now my livelihood is gone because of something I have no control over. My workers are asking me when the next payday will be. I do not have an answer for them." Samuel is not alone. Across Colombia's coffee-growing regions, more than 400,000 farmers are facing the same collapse. The Colombian Coffee Growers Federation estimates that the tariff will erase $2.1 billion in export revenue this year. That is revenue that will not return even if the tariff is lifted tomorrow, because American roasters have already restructured their supply chains to source beans from Brazil, Ethiopia, and Guatemala. Once a supply chain shifts, it does not shift back without years of relationship rebuilding. But the damage is not limited to Colombia. It is radiating across the American coffee industry in ways that most consumers will not notice until their favorite local cafe closes or their preferred brand disappears from the shelf. Independent roasters are the first casualties. These are small businesses, operating on margins of 8 to 12%, with no ability to absorb sudden cost shocks. A roaster in Austin that employed 14 people and supplied 37 cafes across Texas shut down operations entirely on April 9th. The owner posted a statement on Instagram explaining that 70% of her product line was built on Colombian beans, and there was no economically viable substitute that could be sourced and integrated in time to avoid bankruptcy. She thanked her customers. She apologized to her employees, and she locked the doors. Similar closures are happening in Seattle, Denver, Brooklyn, and Portland. The Small Business Administration does not track closures by cause, so there is no official count. But industry analysts estimate that between 300 and 500 specialty roasters will close by the end of the year as a direct result of the tariff. Each closure eliminates an average of 9 jobs. That is between 2,700 and 4,500 people who will lose their employment because of a trade policy aimed at a completely unrelated issue. The cafes that depend on those roasters are next. A coffee shop in Richmond, Virginia, that had built its brand around serving single-origin Colombian coffee switched to a generic medium roast blend from a national distributor. Within 2 weeks, the owner noticed a 23% drop in morning traffic. Regular customers stopped coming. Online reviews mentioned that the coffee doesn't taste the same anymore. The owner tried to explain the tariff situation in a Facebook post. The response was a mix of sympathy and indifference. Sympathy does not pay rent. The shop is now listed for sale. This pattern is repeating across the country, not in headlines, not in cable news segments, but in the quiet collapse of small businesses that depended on a supply chain that no longer exists. The grocery store impact is more subtle but no less significant. The premium shelf space that used to hold $12 bags of Colombian coffee now holds Brazilian and Guatemalan alternatives. The problem is that Brazilian coffee has a different flavor profile. It is heavier, less acidic, more bitter. Guatemalan coffee is brighter, but lacks the chocolate and caramel notes that Colombian beans are known for. Coffee drinkers who have spent years developing a preference for Colombian coffee are not finding satisfactory replacements. So they are either paying more for the few remaining Colombian options, buying less coffee overall, or switching to cheaper mass-market brands that do not meet their quality expectations. The result is a quiet downgrade in the daily experience of millions of Americans who will never connect the change in their morning cup to a trade policy decision made in Washington. And then there is the price effect. The tariff was supposed to punish Colombia, but tariffs do not punish exporters. They punish importers, and importers pass the cost to consumers. The average price of a 12-ounce bag of coffee in American grocery stores has increased by 19% since March 23rd. Not because of inflation, not because of rising production costs, because of the tariff. That 19% increase costs the average American household an additional $73 per year. Multiply that by the 42 million households that buy premium coffee regularly, and the total cost to American consumers is $3.06 billion annually. That money does not go to the government as tariff revenue because most of the coffee is no longer being imported. It goes nowhere. It is simply economic activity that no longer happens. Wealth that evaporates because a supply chain was destroyed for reasons unrelated to the product itself. Lawrence Feldman, a former Deputy Secretary of Commerce who served under 3 administrations, addressed the situation in a keynote speech at the International Trade Conference in Washington on April 15th. Feldman is not a partisan. He has worked for both Republican and Democratic presidents. He is known for his measured tone and his refusal to engage in political theater, which is why his comments carried unusual weight. Tariffs are a tool, Feldman said. But like any tool, their effectiveness depends on whether they are used to achieve an objective that tariffs can actually accomplish. You do not use a hammer to cut wood. You do not use a tariff to solve an immigration dispute. What we are witnessing with the Colombian coffee tariff is a catastrophic misapplication of trade policy. The tariff has not changed Colombia's immigration enforcement posture. It has not returned a single deportee to Colombian soil. What it has done is destroy a supply chain, eliminate thousands of American jobs, and impose billions of dollars in costs on American consumers and businesses. That is not strategy. That is self-inflicted damage disguised as strength. Feldman's speech was covered briefly in the trade press, but ignored by mainstream outlets. The story is too complex, too slow-moving, and too far removed from the political drama that dominates cable news. But the people living the story do not need a news segment to tell them it is happening. They see it every morning when they open their cabinet and realize the coffee they used to buy is no longer on the shelf. The signature phrase did not come from Trump. It did not come from Congress. It came from a handwritten sign taped to the window of a closed coffee roaster in Seattle. The sign was photographed by a customer and posted to Twitter, where it was shared 18,000 times in 48 hours. We roasted the best. You drank the best. Policy killed the rest. 12 words. No explanation needed. The phrase spread across the specialty coffee industry like a shared eulogy. It appeared on Instagram stories, in industry newsletters, and in the group chats of roasters who had spent decades building businesses that no longer exist. It was printed on t-shirts sold as fundraisers for laid-off workers. It was painted on the side of a delivery truck in Austin. And it became the unofficial epitaph for an industry that was thriving 3 months ago and is now fighting for survival. Trump has not acknowledged the coffee industry's collapse. He has not been asked about it in a press conference. The issue has not appeared in any White House briefing. Because the story does not fit the narrative structure that political journalism depends on. There is no villain to confront, no scandal to investigate, no dramatic confrontation to film. There is only the slow, grinding destruction of an industry that millions of Americans interact with every day without realizing it is disappearing. The philosophical principle at work here is simple but brutal. Policy does not exist in a vacuum. Every action has consequences that ripple outward in ways the original actor never anticipated. Trump imposed a tariff to punish Colombia for an immigration dispute. But the punishment did not land on Colombian politicians. It landed on Colombian farmers who have no influence over their government's immigration policy. And it landed on American roasters, American cafe owners, and American consumers who had no involvement in the dispute at all. This is the core failure of using trade as a weapon. Trade is not a missile you fire at an adversary. It is a bridge that connects economies, livelihoods, and communities. When you destroy the bridge to punish someone on the other side, you do not hurt them alone. You hurt everyone who depended on that bridge to move goods, services, and money in both directions. And once the bridge is gone, rebuilding it takes years, if it happens at all. Trump tried to force Colombia to comply with his immigration demands. Instead, he destroyed the livelihoods of 400,000 Colombian farmers and eliminated thousands of American jobs. He thought he was wielding power. He was dismantling infrastructure. And the Americans who depended on that infrastructure are waking up every morning to discover that the product they bought, without thinking about it, is gone. We roasted the best. You drank the best. Policy killed the rest. That phrase will outlast the tariff. It will outlast Trump's term. It will be remembered as the moment when trade policy stopped being an abstract political debate and became a tangible loss in the daily lives of millions of people who never thought it would affect them. Because it turns out that when you weaponize trade, the casualties are not limited to the target. They include everyone standing nearby, and in this case, everyone standing nearby was holding a cup of coffee they will never taste again. Please hit the bell icon and subscribe my channel for daily updates.